Hello, Conceal Coalition family. Austin Davis, your National Director of Training. I am glad to be joining you this month for this month's webinar. Hopefully you're excited about this topic. It's something near and dear to my heart. I know I say every time we do a webinar, this is exciting to me, but this is also one of those topics that's really exciting to me. And it is about making your range trip more effective and safer and not being that person at the range. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with that person at the range, you're at the range, there was someone who's behaving badly, dangerously, or inappropriate or not following the rules. Well, if you've never seen that at the range, that person may be you. We want to make sure it's not only just you, but it's also the people you bring to the range with you. Now, we're going to be working in a minute over my checklist. I have a laminated checklist, and every Concealed Coalition instructor in the system that you go to should have a copy of this as well. I have a theory, whether it's worthwhile or not. I've been doing this range work for about 35 years, and when I started, my little checklist was just this big. Every one of these items on here is something I had a problem with one of my civilian students or one of my police officers that I train. And hopefully today, when we go through this little process, we can make you safer, more effective, and more welcome at any range you happen to go to. Before we start off on what we do at the range, though, let's talk about a few things. Number one, before you go, let's discuss some things before you even go to the range. First off, what gun or guns do you want to bring? Now, if you only own one gun, you can skip this section. But if you're like most of our Concealed Coalition family, you got guns, plural. So let's talk about this. Personally, I think one of the biggest mistakes we can make is when we go to the range is we can take 5, 10, 15, 20 guns. I'm a real big fan of 2 guns max when I go to range. The reason is it kind of goes back to my theory, beware of the person with one gun. It's really hard when you go to the range, you're just going bing, 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 and changing out guns to actually improve with your skill set in the guns. Now, if your range is the backyard of your aunt, uncle, mother, father, or your back 40 acres, you're shooting in your private, and you just want to show the plethora of guns you own, maybe taking all of them is a good idea. But I find when we go to an indoor-outdoor commercial range that really limiting what you take makes a lot of sense. So before you go, try to give some thought to what you want to do. Also, what you want to do with that gun. Are you working on accuracy? Are you working on performance? So accuracy is just mechanically, is the gun shooting where you want to shoot? If you're working on performance, that's going to be you and the gun working together. If you're working on reliability, that may be some combination of 1 and 2 with a higher volume of ammo. What gear do you bring? Before you leave for the range, look through your gear bag and check to make sure you have everything you need. It is not uncommon for my officers to show up with the wrong ammunition, with no range bag, just a whole bunch of stuff in there. Make sure you have your ear pro, you have your eye pro. Also, before we go, make sure that you got your clothing sorted out. You know, if I was wearing this shirt on the range, there's a good chance a piece of hot brass can come down in my clothing. So I would either have to buckle this thing on up really tight, or think about some other plan to close this on off. And the problem is when we have hot brass that goes in bad spots, we tend to do this stuff right here and we forget about where the gun's oriented. So before you go, think about what guns you're going to take, what gear you're going to take, make sure your clothing is squared away, but also any guest you take, especially if they're newbies, just let them know, hey guys, there's could be a problem there. Also in my range bag, I have a bunch of clippies. So if somebody does have some sort of open front, we can just clip this in. I also carry some hair bands. So if somebody needs to get the hair out the way, not a problem. I always have a couple of ball caps in my range bag. I'm a firm believer of making sure that we have a ball cap on the range. And the reason is if we get hot brass between our eye pro and that can be a real problem. And I find a ball cap really works to keep us a lot safer. Also, before you go, have a plan. Now, when you think about planning going to the range, going, Austin, you're being a little pedantic here. We're just going to have fun. I mean, going to have fun is okay, but just make sure you understand we're going to have fun. But you can also make sure that there's a reason why you're going. Ammo's pretty expensive. Range time is pretty expensive. And for some people, you're not getting to the range as often as you would like. And this may be a once a year experience, once every 2 year experience, once every 6 month experience. And you may think, well, I'm going to work on precision. I'm going to work on performance. And I'm going to just burn up a bunch of range ammo and make some noise. And those are okay. If you really want to improve your range experience and your shooting overall, I have a very expensive gadget that you can buy and invest in. It's called a spiral notebook. Buy one. Put it in your bag. Before you go, write out what you're going to do. How many rounds do you have? Let's say you're going to burn off 200 rounds of pistol ammunition. Maybe we donate and say, delegate some range and say, you know what? I haven't shot with my dominant hand alone for a long time. Maybe I'm going to work on my one-handed skills and spend 20 rounds on it. Maybe I'm going to work on my non-dominant hand in case my hand's ever injured or I have to switch or something happens. Maybe I need to spend 10 rounds on my non-dominant hand alone. Maybe I'm going to work on changing my grip and see how that's going to affect whether my end result. Pardon me, I'm getting ready to sneeze. I live in a swamp and I have sinuses. But maybe you'll donate some of that. If you're at a range that allows drawing, maybe you'll say, I'm going to work on my draw to first shot time. Personally, I hope if you are going to work on some performance issue that you've done it all dry fire safely well before we ever get to the range. You don't want to, anytime you're doing a performance activity with a firearm, make sure you work on the basics. That's mechanics first, that you're doing things safely, that the fingers are the trigger guard, that the gun is coming up on target without pointing at something it's not to point at. Once you get mechanics down, then go for consistency, then go for intensity. The problem is there's a thing in this world called Hebb's Law, and that's any behavior that's wired together fires together. And the first time you wire behavior and fire it together, it becomes really locked in a hard to overwrite way. So if part of your range preparation, getting ready to go to the range to have a safe, productive experience, make sure you have any active performance skills worked out in dry fire well before you get there. And so then you might want to go, I'm just going to spend 50 rounds just burning off. But I find if we have a plan for that ammo, we tend to shoot less ammo, we get better results. And you also always on every range trip might want to think about working on something that you don't do well. We all like going there and shooting the 1 inch square at 21 inches and making sure we don't hit any of the lines. I'm down with that. But maybe we want to say, I'm going to work on distance today. So instead of 21 feet, 7 yards, I'm going to work in the 15. Maybe you got some metallic targets and you say, I'm going to see if I can push this pistol. And if you have a red dot, this is easily done, up to 25, 50. One of the police departments that I train with, regularly we shoot out to 75 yards at man-sized steel. And what's interesting is a lot of people think, why would I ever want to use my handgun? 75 yards. I mean, all guns within 3 feet, 3 seconds, and 3 rounds fired. Well, that's great average, but that's not the reality of it. Have you ever been in a Walmart, a hospital, a grocery store, and measured, stepped off how far that is? In my local grocery store, it's 130 yards on the back side of the store. Where my mom lives in assisted living, it's 125 yards down the end of a hallway. So if you're ever in a situation where you depend on your gun for defense, maybe you want to make some of your plan for this safe and productive range day is to go ahead and stretch out the limit. The problem is a lot of times we don't like to look bad on the range. We want to shoot these nice old tight groups. The only problem with that is if we only practice what we are good at, we never get better. It's kind of like working out. We always need to put a little more weight, go a little farther. And what I like doing in my performance planning up the range is I like shooting at a place I'm really comfortable with and then either speeding it up, moving it out, or adding a performance cost into that, which the group starts blowing up and I start trying to bring it back down. So proper planning on your ammo. And then again, if you start making notes, every time you go back, you can look back at what you did last time, put some notes in there. My weak-handed shooting really wasn't that great, or I really couldn't work the controls on that. And you may want to put that in for your notes. Now, ready to go to the range, you got everything all packed up, you're ready to go. Let's think about a few things. First off, if it's a commercial range you're going to, not Aunt Sally's back pasture, nothing wrong with shooting in the back pasture. Some of my best shooting with family has always been in somebody's farm or ranch. Think about how you're going to leave the car and how you're going to access the car. A lot of times if we're at a range and you leave anything out that looks like it could have a gun in it or gun related, you may run a greater than average chance of having your car broken into and something stolen. Even if you don't have the gun in there, but there's a presence of an empty gun case or something. So think about how we're going to keep that out of sight in the trunk or the tonneau cover of the vehicle, underneath the seat, throw a blanket over, whatever. When we get there, make sure we do not play with our guns in the parking lot. One of the things that makes me very nervous as a firearms professional is when I show up and I see someone fiddling and futzing with their gun out of the back of a trunk or the back of a pickup truck. Have that set up and all ready to go, whatever condition you need to transport that firearm to the range. And then when you get there, don't fiddle with guns in the parking lot. And please do not fiddle with it in the ante room before you go on or out to the outdoor range. Always make sure that you handle your guns at home. When you get there, don't worry about manipulating any firearm until you put it on a bench and it's pointed in a safe direction. Also, be very careful, now that you're aware of this, for other people around you fiddling and futzing around. We had somebody who was killed in a range gun store that was attached to a range. He came in to sell a used gun, and he was trying to unload it there to show them to get the bid on what they're going to buy, pull the trigger, and kill the person right next to him, innocent bystander. So we have to be very conscious about our behavior at the range, but we also have to keep our head on a swivel, situationally aware, just like we wrote in the book, and worry about the people around us handling guns. And if you do see someone handling guns, you have a couple of choices. One, drive right out of the parking lot, call them on the range, or just leave your stuff in the car, walk right inside and say, hey, there's somebody scary handling a gun out in the range. Don't ever be afraid of when you see a safety violation. If you see something, say something to the staff. Trust me, that range personnel have as much invested in you having a safe experience as you, but they need help because it can't be everywhere at all times. Once you come in, if this is the first time to this commercial range, whether it's an indoor, outdoor range, if you're not sure about what's expected of you, what the rules are, what the procedures are, do yourself a favor. Be a professional and say, hey, what's going on here? I've never shot this range. Can you give me a quick rundown on how to do it? A lot of people are afraid of looking like a newbie or I don't know anything. I've been doing this for 35 years at a pretty high level. If I come to a new range, I always ask them, hey guys, this is my first time shooting here. Can you kind of give me the rundown? Some ranges will let me draw from a holster. Some won't. Some ranges let me work on my split times and tracking my dot and getting that second round off under control. Some have time between dots. Some let you just put the action down when they call range hot and show it open. Some need chamber flags that go in there. So when it comes time to spend time in the range, it's their range. They want you to be comfortable and safe and productive there. And the way we do that is never be afraid to ask them, hey man, first time I'm here. If you're a regular steady customer, from time to time, it's not a bad idea to ask them, hey guys, any changes in the range rules or anything I need to know about that happened here that I need to be extra careful about? And they may tell you, well, we had this, and this happen, so you can start looking out for it. Once you get there and you've checked in, the next thing you want to do is you want to have a range safety briefing. I use a laminated card. If y'all want, send us a text or an email and say, we really need a Concealed Coalition family version of this range safety card. Mine covers 5 areas: the purpose of today's event, the range layout and limits, range safety rules, firing line commands, and emergency procedures. Now, I've been developing and working on this thing for 30 plus years, but you notice I still look at it when I go through this. The problem is I wouldn't trust a pilot or surgeon that didn't have a checklist. The reason I have a checklist is it reduces the risk in any repetitive, dangerous environment, like flying an airplane, performing surgery. So it's really important to lay this out. So what is the purpose of today's event? If it's just to have fun, okay, we know what that is. What if it's, I'm not really interested in shooting today, but I have a new shooter with me. So if that's the case, then we have to explain to the person, hey, let me give you my new shooter pitch. If I'm taking somebody to the range who's never shot before, whether or not they have gun anxiety or not, here's what I tell them. I'm going to tell you something you may not know about firearms shooting. Nobody, including me, everybody in the range, nobody cares how well you shoot today. No, I'll say it again. Oh, you said that. I'll say it again. Nobody cares how well you shoot today. What we care about is how safe you shoot. Shooting well is a skill. Shooting safe is a mindset, skill set, and a temperament. So if you just remember 2 things for me today, we're going to be great. Number 1, keep the pointy thing, the big sound maker hole pointed towards the berm, whether that's a big pile of dirt, whether that's a metal backstop that captures the thing where it's a bunch of chewed up rubber. As long as you keep that point in a safe direction today, that's important. The reason is it's easy when we're manipulating the gun, especially a handgun, to turn it in an area that is not a safe direction. Then you might want to tell them, look, I've never been at this range. I've never been to the lane we're shooting at. When we get up there, we'll take a look. And almost any range that's been around for a while, if you look right where you lay down on that little bench, you look around, you'll see bullet holes all in there. How'd that happen? People will get finger on the trigger, gun pointed in a bad direction, and it happens. So if they forget nothing else, have them point in there. Then you might want to go ahead and comfort them and say, look, there's really something important here. What's the difference between a firearm's tragedy and embarrassment? It's direction of the muzzle when the gun goes off. If you're in my house and you decide to play with a gun that I left out because I'm stupid, because remember, a gun only belongs 3 places: in the hand of a rational, sober, competent, trained adult, attached to the body by a holster or sling to competent, trained, sober adult, or locked away from anybody who's not a competent, trained, sober adult. But you start playing around and all of a sudden you zing off around into the couch. That's an embarrassment. If my wife is sitting on the couch and you zing around off in my wife's sitting on the couch, that's a tragedy. So try to explain to them that, hey, we want to keep this thing pointed down range. Second thing is keep our finger off the trigger. Unless the sights are on the target, then we decide to shoot. And then make sure you counsel them on where finger off the trigger is. See, a lot of people have their finger right here and they think it's off the trigger. If we have a startle response, a big trip, the gun's going to go off. We want this on a high register. When we look through the gun from the side, we should not see any finger at all. We see a finger that's not really out of the trigger guard. And you might want to finally, as you're kind of prepping them for this first shooting experience, you might want to tell them the real secret about gun handling. You know, it doesn't matter if I got a cell phone or a pen. Doesn't matter where I point. Doesn't matter where I point my fork. Doesn't matter where I point my TV remote control. But there is one item that we have to have a part of our brain that says, wow, every time I pick this thing up, it's literally a life and death decision. And I need to have a whole procedure that is in a special part of my brain that says, gun, this stuff activates. The real problem with new shooters is it's usually not so much when they shoot. It's the minute they get through, they're excited. They're in a place under almost an amygdala hijack. They just had a bunch of explosions go off their hand. And that's when they come back in with their finger on the trigger and they want to turn around and talk to you. So make sure you explain to them that these rules, the special part of your brain, every time I pick up a gun, we're making a life decision. And that works until we set it down and the gun is unloaded and shown clear. Let's say we're coming to the range for a state mandated license to carry class. What I would tell my class then is, guys, before we start, if you have any questions, that's great. Once this certification or my police qualifications, once qualification starts, I'm not a coach anymore. I'm just a machine that's going to grade the performance of what happens here and looking for safety. If it's a couple of guys looking to do competition, we may want to just go ahead and go, look, I've been doing this a while, you've been doing this a while. Let's just run through real quick. Where's our go, no go? When we move from this stage to this stage, we're going to make sure we point the finger down range. And while you're on the range, I'm going to keep an eye on you and you on me. And we're going to coach each other to make sure we're not that shooter. Once we get there and you've explained to them that really it doesn't matter how well you shoot, as long as you shoot safe, that we're looking for good judgment. Next thing you want to do is you want to give a quick description of the course of fire. Today we brought 200 rounds of ammo and we're going to shoot them up and have fun. But what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just shooting singles and then maybe we're going to switch guns later on. Just kind of give them a flow of what's going to happen today. And even though I'm doing this by myself, I kind of think about what I'm doing. Because when I show up to the range for me on a personal time with my carry gun, I think I'm going to go shoot all my, I'm going to say duty ammo, but my street defensive ammo that's in my gun. I want to make sure the thing I've been carrying for the last 30 days or 6 weeks since I've been in the range, that I'm in, depending on to save my life and others, that it shoots the point of any point of impact that I expect. That the recoil from the defensive ammo is not a novelty to my brain. Sometimes you'll find, and if you don't believe me, ever try this once, load a couple rounds of range ammo, a couple rounds of defensive ammo, range ammo, and just sort of random force, and then shoot it, bang, 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 bang. You might go, wow, my street ammo is just a lot more oomphy, I like that, than my duty ammo. But what I like is, if I shoot my duty ammo up, yeah, it's kind of expensive to run through a full mag of this, but it lets me know that, hey, my ammo's sorted out and it's okay. This is especially important if you're one of those people who likes to load and unload the gun, and you've been loading those top 2 rounds more and more. Because every time you load it, 2 things happen. It was not designed to be loaded and unloaded. So every time the nose of the bullet hits the feed ramp, it puts pressure on the seating depth of the case. This can raise the pressure of the round. It can also change the chambering characteristics because all bullets are built to a thing called SAMI standards, which is this sort of universal thing that says all 9mm will be a minimum, maximum of this, of so much pressure and so much dimensions of measurement. Also, it's not uncommon for people who load and unload the same top 2 rounds to have a lot of the material from the primer come out And if you haven't shot your duty ammo in a long time, you might be surprised to find out how it is less reliable than you would have assumed. So you might want to just put that into your thought process in this. Next thing is I want to identify the safety officers in this. Because if I have a problem with someone on the range, I want to know who's around. I can go say, hey, this guy keeps pointing a gun, or they're taking their gun to their bag, not the bag to the gun, and look around. Also, I have to make sure I put myself in the right mindset to say, I'm also a safety officer. One of the things I always tell my students before they start, whether it's civilians or LE, is I always go, hey, I've been a professional firearms instructor for 35 years. In 35 years, I've never shot a student. I never had a student shoot me. And I never had a student shoot anybody else. Do you find that comforting? I go, yeah, you shouldn't. My time's coming. New guy. Got a 50-50 chance of everything going right. Statistically, I'm weighted on the other side of that performance stack. So I treat every range session as potential life and death experience, not only for my behavior, but the people around me. So identifying the safety officers and then mentally cueing in the fact that you too are a safety officer. The next thing is a range layout. If I'm at an indoor range and they've got the windows or the television screens that's showing this, I may take a second to kind of look and just kind of watch the flow of this thing. If they put me in a range and I've got other options, it's not just the only range available, and I see a large group of what I consider to be a bunch of newbie instructors, I'll go back into the check-in thing and go, hey man, number 14 is your number 13. Number 13 is making me nervous. Can you send me down to one or two? I see they're open. Have them switch me out and move me around. Foreshadowing is really a good thing. If I'm shooting in an indoor range, all indoor ranges are probably going to have this thing called an air gap. There'll be two doors before we go in. Make sure that one door is closed before you open the other one, because any of that sound that comes out, the people in the preliminary area, the sort of prep area, they don't have hearing protection on. So you also want to make sure that's this. When you walk on down and find your booth, make sure that the targets go in and out, that's working, and that you feel pretty comfortable in this space and the other people around you. Also identify the top, bottom, and sides of where you're going to shoot, and then determine where you're going to be able to point your gun left, right, up, down to make sure that we don't have an issue. Remember rule number 4, we'll talk about later on, beware of the 4 Bs. Got that from Buddy Anthony, my brother Anthony. And that is the 4 Bs. What's before, behind, beside, and beyond your target. And so a lot of times when we're at the range, excuse me, when the target's really close and I'm shooting it, the bullet path may be going down and into the ground. That's not the backstop. That's no bueno. Depending on your height and the setup of it, if it's really close and you're shooting a certain way of the target, maybe going to the berm, or maybe going dangerously close to the top of the berm, over the berm, and hitting the backstop of the ceiling. So be sure when you're going out there to make sure you understand the range layout, that you understand how to post the targets, where those constrictions are. Also understand any unique situations how to post and retrieve the targets. Sometimes in our outdoor range, we will shoot for a period of time, let's say 20 minutes, then they call a ceasefire. You have to load, show clear, or you have to rack your gun, or put a range chamber flag in there, and then make sure you don't walk over to the handle of the gun. Sometimes, though, the problem with that is I'm walking down and I look back, I'll see people loading magazines or futzing with the gun behind us, and this makes me real nervous. So, again, be aware, be informed of the rules. If you see someone breaking the rules, you see something, you got to say something. If it's an immediate thing, yell out, stop, drop the gun, don't do that. If it's something a little slower, less intense, okay? You just need to go over and find that person you've already identified as a range safety officer and say, hey, over on 4, they're futzing with the gun when we're down range. This is making me very nervous. And if you find that when you shoot at this range, those range safety officers you identified are not receptive to your problems, you might want to consider just going to another range, or you might want to consider calling up the next day and saying, I need to talk to the owner. I had an experience on the range that I'm not sure that owner understands about their staff. Because a lot of times these owners don't really understand what their range safety officers are or not doing, or how they are enforcing regulations and rules there at the range. And then also, when you look at the range, just check for any unusual circumstances for people, place, or process. If you're in Texas, you got a bunch of mosquitoes around, this could be a problem. A lot of outdoor ranges, if you're the first person to sit at the bench, it could be a wasp or some sort of problem underneath that thing. So make sure when you're there, you look all around to make sure that you're not going to hit a dirt dauber's nest or set something off. Now, once you get the range there's going to be 4 rules. What I like about the 4 safety rules, originally invented by Jeff Cooper, and NRA cut them down to 3, and some people do 5 and whatnot. What I like about the 4 rules is they are very important in a range, but since we are making a life and death decision by picking up a gun, this is a good time to lock them in our heads. If you don't have these 4 rules memorized, not only memorized, but in a way that they're in your procedural memory, that they become just a part of how you handle a gun, you're that person on the range. You need to think about it. First range is treat all guns at all times are loaded. For me, a firearm is loaded if the magazine is still in it, where the cylinder is not open. If I lock the slide back and I set the gun down where I can see in the chamber, it's unloaded. Slides back, see the chamber, no magazine. If I put the same gun with the slide locked back, the magazine out this way, I can't see in the chamber. So we want to make sure we define what an unloaded gun is. The next thing is we have an unloaded gun. Next thing is don't point the gun. You're not trying to kill or destroy. We're going to talk to our students and ourselves about that again. To be very conscious of where we point this gun. This is doubly true with a handgun versus a long gun. With the long gun, it's a little easier to keep track of where I'm pointing it. The problem with the handgun is because of the wrist mobility and flexibility we got, it's very easy when you're going to lock the gun back to take it from the safe direction and do one of these numbers right here. If you need to do this to lock the gun back, no problem. Keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, turn your body sideways, and then do that exact same motion. For some of you who have problems handling the slide, bringing this thing into your workspace and doing this to lock the slide back is really the most biomechanically efficient way to do it. The problem is the gun will point in the wrong spot. So finger high index, turn your body so the gun's naturally pointed in a safe direction. Now lock it back, drop the mag, lock it back, put it down where you can see inside the chamber. Keep your finger off the trigger unless your sights are on the target, ready to shoot, and get the finger off the trigger the minute your sights are off the target and you're ready to shoot. I find the finger trigger thing again, when they're coming back from shooting, that's when the real problems happen. And the 4 Bs, beware of what's before, beyond, beside, and beyond your target. Eyes and ears, always on when we're out there. Also counsel them if your eyes start fogging, don't take your glasses off. Secure your gun, unload it, put flag in, bench it, whatever you got to do. Walk to a place of safety, clean the fogging or whatever issues you got. Make sure you and your people understand if they can't hear you, don't pull the thing away. Just go, hey, I can't hear you. And if brass gets out on the clothing, make sure that they understand that finger off the trigger, point the gun out, and then just keep this out here in a nice, safe direction while you deal with wherever that brass came in. Hopefully we don't have brass coming down in the clothing because we secured that part before we went on the range and planned with good clothing. One of the big concerns I have is we always want to bring the bag to the gun. We don't want to take the gun offline back to the bag. So always keep the thing pointed. When you put your bag down, if the gun's turned facing in a direction that's not safe, turn the whole gun in the bag to the safe direction. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out and then switch it. Move the bag around to work with you. Also, if we drop any gear, if you drop any gear, make sure you put the gun down or holster the gun, then reach down and pick it up. I find dropping gear is a real problem because we start moving the gun in a direction that it's not safe. Also, if you tend to drop a firearm, it can happen. We're humans. These things happen. My motto is this. In a commercial kitchen, a falling knife has no handle. The reason is because you go to grab it, you probably end up cutting yourself. If this gun starts falling, you go to grab it, you can have a sympathetic response and then zing around off in some place that we are not going to be accountable for. So if it falls, just jump back, quick feet or happy feet, let it hit, look around. I meant to do that. Pick the gun up, careful index, always point in the right direction, and then work from there. Firing line commands. If I'm shooting with other people, we just need to have some standard firing commands. So if I'm working with somebody on a timer or helping them get through a course of fire or a student or a new shooter, it's real simple. Unload and show clear. That's where they drop the magazine. Unload the gun, show it's clear, put it down with the action open, or top the gun off, holster up. When it's time to get ready to shoot, if I'm working off a timer or some sort of skill set, I'll explain the course of fire. 3 rounds from the holster, 4 seconds. I repeat it, 3 rounds from the holster, 4 seconds. Sometimes because I'm behind the students in front of me and the berm is down there, I find it easy to stick my fingers out and I'm talking right into their earphones. I go 3 rounds, 4 seconds from the holster. 3 rounds, 4 seconds from the holster. Then I go, does the shooter understand the course of fire? And if the shooter does, they don't go, yes, because I can't hear them. They're faced that way. Guns are going off. Have them nod their head either a positive or negative affirmative type motion. Shooter ready. They are neither an affirmative or a non-affirmative motion. Stand by for the beep, or stand by and then say threat or go or start or orange, banana, bicycle, whatever commands you have. It doesn't really matter what range commands you use, as long as we're all using the same range commands. So find the range commands that work and then work on it. Really important. Now, safety violations. If I'm working with a first-time friend shooter, if I'm working with a civilian or law enforcement, I tell them all the time, there are two types of safety violations. One's a major, one's a minor. It's a minor violation to where I find that every time you come back with the gun, the finger's on the trigger, and I keep telling you, finger off the trigger, because they'll come back like this and you're ready to holster with it in there. Maybe that's a minor, maybe that's a major. If I think it was just a minor violation, that's probably going to be something I counsel them once. But I tell them, if I see it again, we're done for the day. A lot of times when we're around guns, we tend to lose our ability to think. We get overwhelmed by events, all the gunshots going off, all the explosional responsibility. We lose, neurologically speaking, our prefrontal cortex, and we start working off the primitive parts of our brain. So we start losing these fine skills. If they're not permanently ingrained, and you just got through a really active set of shooting, it's very easy to make some stupid mistakes. Now, if you take that gun and go, wow, I shot really well, and turn around and point it at me, we're done. We're done. Done. Non-discussion. No discussion. You're gone. Now, maybe I take them outside, counsel them, let them get a drink of water, cool off, get their head back, maybe I'll bring them back. Maybe they're done for the day. Last year, I had a police officer who was the end of a range of officers I had who got through shooting, and he turned around to me with a gun in his hand. I started to go for my gun because my brain said, we're in a gunfight. Some dude's pointing a gun at me. He saw this, and he lowered the gun very quickly, and we terminated his employment from our police department the next day. And some people in the department were our rank and file were very upset about that. I can't believe you fired blank just because he pointed a gun at you. And I'm going, look, if he cannot handle dealing with a firearm responsible for saving citizens and other officers and not shooting himself in a controlled, well-lit environment, we cannot trust him on the street with that same firearm. He's got to go. So write my letter to the chief, write my letter to the state. And I said, this is why we took him off the range. He is unsafe with the firearm. Done. This was all explained to them. I think if you use a gun for defense and you can't handle a gun in a post-shooting event in a safe way on a range and controlled environment without the stress of a life or death decision, a stress of making sure that you're not shooting innocent people and you're getting the bad guy, the lawsuit that's going to come, the social prices you're going to pay for using that gun. We can't do that on a range. We can't carry one on the street. So for me, this is like a performance polygraph. Now, that may sound harsh, but the problem is firearms are a legal right to own them. Training, responsibility, and competent handling is our responsibility. So we have a right to own these firearms. We have a responsibility to handle them well. And if you carry one to protect yourself or some other people, that is very different than this thing that lives in your nightstand. So you need to hold yourself and the other people around you to higher standards. Maybe that's too harsh. If so, put it down there. But if that's too harsh, you're probably one of those people that I'm watching doubly carefully on the range. And if you understand this, I probably want to see a hallelujah in the comments because you're going, I get it. And if I seem a little upset, it's because I see so much unsafe gun handling. And again, if you're not the best shooter, that's okay. Once you figure out what your wobble zone is, what you can hit under pressure without a doubt in a certain distance, that's great. We can always extend that with understanding the physics of handling a gun, which is leverage and friction, handling the trigger, and how you're using your visual acuity to sight the target. But if you don't have that part in your head that says safe gun handling, whether you're under stress, not under stress, tired, sleepy, whatever, we got a problem. And this is where we diagnose that problem. Now, emergency procedures. If you haven't seen my webinar on dealing with gunshot wounds, please go back and watch that. If you think we need to do it again, that's okay. I am not a paramedic. I'm not a doctor. I'm an EMT, but I am a first responder medical instructor for ALERT, which is Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. I'm also a civilian rapid response instructor for ALERT as well, and I'm a National Stop the Bleed instructor. We're going to arrange with a thing that puts holes in the victim. We need to fix the hole. The mechanism that's going to kill you from that gunshot wound is going to be blood loss. So if you don't have a way to stop that, which is direct pressure, which is always handy, it's right on you, a tourniquet and on a pack of wound. If you don't know how to sweep, using like a bath protocol or marsh protocol to find that injury, you don't have some sort of treatment protocol that tells you which one to look for. If you don't have an evacuation plan already figured out, you are way, way behind the curve. So I really recommend that if you go to a range, at the very least, when you're checking in, ask them, if something does go wrong here, do you guys have a gunshot kit and where is it? The problem is without you going and looking through it, you don't know if it's a soft T or a SWAT, or it's some sort of weird tourniquet you've never seen. You don't know if it's still in the plastic. So have gear that you know how to use and you've practiced with on your person. And if you don't know why it's important, take your thumb and put it down next to your leg. That's about the size of your femoral artery. Lower limb shots in firearms are very common, especially if they're self-inflicted because you shot yourself. About 16,000 Americans have self-inflicted gun wounds every year. And if you nick that thing, that without treatment is probably going to be a fatal gunshot. Now you may get lucky because if it doesn't hit something vital bleeding, it's kind of like stabbing your leg with a number 2 pencil. But if it does hit something that's a primary bleeder, the quickness and quality of your action will determine their life. On the back of this, I also have a little chart that shows my students that if you get shot here or here, you're going to get a tourniquet. You get shot here or here, you're going to get at least 2 tourniquets. If you get shot in the sort of hip pelvis area or one of the shoulder areas or the neck, we're going to attack that wound. If you get shot here, it says you're going to get a chest seal, but in my case, you're going to get treated with diesel, gasoline, or aviation fuel. Either I'm grabbing you, I'm throwing you in my evac vehicle, I'm taking the pre-planned route to my closest ER, or I'm putting you in a box, ambulance and police talk. It runs off diesel, or I'm getting life flight in my area, the medical helicopter evacuation to come land and get you out of there. All this sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? I'm talking about kicking people off the range. I'm talking about gun injuries. I'm talking about pointing the guns the wrong way. And I'm going to hammer this home again. We have a right to have firearms, but training and responsible handling is our responsibility. So when we go to the range, we have a responsibility to do a number of things. One, to make sure we don't hurt ourselves, hurt the other people we trust around us, and to make sure we're aware of the other people around us so they don't hurt us. And this is the place that we're actually using live fire with this firearm. And if we can't handle our behavior on the range in a well-lit, well-controlled environment, it's not going to get any better in a Walmart parking lot or an active shooter situation at your house of worship or your corporation where you're protecting your home. You got to make sure that you can think with a gun in your hand. We want to build thinkers well before we build shooters. And this gun handling is going to get you in more trouble than bad shooting. Bad shooting is still a risk, don't get me wrong, but it's a gun handling that's going to be a real problem. Also, one final thing is you may want to think about, if you can't draw from there, is shooting from a compressed low ready and practicing that. And that is a skill that a lot of us don't really think about, and a lot of my officers really struggle with. And that is probably going to be one of the, if you ever pull a gun and it's not time to shoot them, well, that means it's not time to point a gun at them either. So you want to be in a ready position, compressed and low ready. We almost ought to do a whole webinar, just ready positions, because it's a confusion of somebody. And if it's ever explained to you once and you practice it in dry fire, it's really hard to ever go back to the old habits, because it just makes so much sense to really have a systematic and an intelligent approach to your ready positions, because not everything is draw and shoot. A lot of times it's draw and assess. So we need to know the difference between compressed low ready and what a SOOL is. And one is a ready position and one is a maneuvering not ready position. And knowing those two could be very, very helpful. So I put a lot out there. Hope you got something out of this. Please pardon some of my passion about some of these topics. But as a guy who professionally spends time on a range, I really want to make my Concealed Coalition family the standard. If you're wearing a Concealed Coalition shirt or hat, or you're a Concealed Coalition instructor or a Concealed Coalition family member, I want us to be the standard on the range. So when people see that, they go, hey, these people are just a little more dialed in than your average bear. And I want you to be the person who's welcome back at any range. And trust me, no matter what kind of range time you spend, at the end of the day, when they reach out to shake your hand, they say, well, I had a great time shooting with you. What they're saying is not that, wow, you were shooting so great, I'm impressed. It's, wow, you were shooting so safe. I was impressed. We don't care how well you shoot. We do care how safely you shoot. So hope to see you at a Concealed Coalition class. We have some big things coming up in 2025 with some around the country tours. We hope you as a family member showing up for that. We're rewriting the books. I've got a new book coming out. It's being published by Rogue Rabbit, and it is on verbal commands for personal protection. Verbal commands used to be tied in with my last book with de-escalation, but I've decided to put a whole set on just how to issue verbal commands. Hopefully that will be coming out probably in the first part of 2025. I hope you're looking forward to that. If you ever have any questions, you've got my number somewhere on the screen. You can go ahead and text me for a response. And if we ever get together, I hope to meet you and shake your hand and realize just how safe you are around guns. I'd like to close everything off. Be a guardian always. No warrior. I'm a native.